English translation 509th contact Saturday 11th of December 2010, 14:56 hours.
I am in the process of correcting some spelling mistakes in the article I started yesterday after you left, and then finished during the night according to your request, Pla. But greetings, dear friends, and also welcome. It is good, Quetzal, that you also have come to visit me again, my friend.
It is a pleasure for me to see you well, and so be my greeting and joy as well.
Oh, you like to express yourself in high form. Thanks, your words make me happy.
I am also pleased to welcome you again today.
It is just strange, because only yesterday we said goodbye in the afternoon. This after we finally finished our Talmudic work after more than 4 months, but still it seems to me that we have not seen each other for a long time. I can understand that this is also the case with Quetzal, because he is very hard to see. It is probably the case that it is the friendly bond that triggers this phenomenon.
That is of correctness, because that is what it really is. I also always feel this way, although I have slightly different concepts of time than you do.
I can also confirm Quetzal's words.
Then we all agree. What do we think now? Do all three of us want to deal with the manual?
That will be necessary, yes. We will check everything, and then you will make necessary corrections as they arise.
That is in my mind.
Good, here, this is the manual. Bernadette printed it out for me.
Then let us get started. That is all there is to it, because we have no control over anything more than the scope of duties of the individual group members.
Ah, I thought you would want to look over everything in the manual.
No, that is not the case, because all other matters are clearly defined by Quetzal or by the unanimity of the group members. However, should any unexpected questions arise, we will of course address them when you present them to us.
So this is the end of my work. We only needed to check the tasks together with you, so that everything is also in order with the manual. And as it turned out, there are a number of things that need to be corrected, and also outdated things need to be removed. Farewell, dear friend, because I have other things to do.
You are in a hurry again, but I wish you all the best and assume that we will meet again. Take care, and goodbye.
A reunion will certainly be the case. So until then.
And he is gone. Although I am used to it, it is always well, just there and gone. But do you want to read the article I wrote yesterday after you left? I have considered your keywords.
Of course I want to read it.
A few words about the religious sectarian cults, their believers, human beings in general, and the Pharisees and their associates.
The terms Pharisees, Sadducees, high priests and scribes in relation to God's laws, as they are called in the Talmud Emmanuel, have today become a single term which no longer has any good in it. In their context, all terms form a compilation of conscious hypocrisy, of cunning and arrogance, as well as of power addiction and deceit. And this was not only the case in Emmanuel's time with the aforementioned, but it has also been carried over into the present day. Although the terms used to describe the hypocritical, devious, arrogant, power-hungry, and deceitful have changed, depending on the religious and sectarian cults and the political and scientific world. Thus, today, in all countries and in all religions, sects, sciences, and politics, there are human beings who deserve these designations. In the same way, human beings of the same kind can also be found in all social circles, emulating the same forms, the whole thing not being conditioned by race and nation. And everything is much more widespread today than it was in the time of Emmanuel, because the mass of humanity was much smaller then. Hypocrites, devious, haughty, power-hungry and deceitful people, etc., also appear in every profession or occupation, But most of them are also to be found today in places where religious and sect leaders, as well as politicians and those with power in the state, and certain unrighteous scientists used to gather and meet in large numbers at all times. Very strange is when some messenger of the truth appeared, a wise man or a prophet who proclaimed the truth or had to proclaim it as a result of a mission, that he was then attacked, slandered, defiled, persecuted, and tried to assassinate. This is particularly true of the servants and representatives of religious, sectarian, and godly cults who pretended, and also today pretend and presume to be representatives of the divine will, supposedly serving an almighty, indulgent, and loving, but otherwise jealous, angry, and punishing God. Something that corresponds to an unprecedented irrationality, for how can a God be almighty, forbearing, and loving, but at the same time jealous, angry, and punishing? But this nonsense has been so from time immemorial, from the simplest medicine man, who dominated the clans with his arts, to the Pharisees, Sadducees, high priests, God law scribes, and the scientists, politicians, and state powers, as well as religious bigwigs and sect leaders of all kinds. And all these, without exception, together with countless believers and followers from the people, felt and still feel threatened by the truth of reality, which is why they have always acted and stirred up against all the wise men and prophets, and against all other human beings who openly brought and still bring the truth and the reality of the creational natural laws and recommendations to the human beings of the earth. Against this fact no denying, no embellishing, and no twisting helps, because it is incontrovertible, as world history has proven since time immemorial. Clearly and unambiguously, the history of mankind bears witness to this truth, and that it has never been different and is also not different today. And the fact is that from time immemorial and up to the present day, in all cases where wise men and prophets have really appeared, it would not have been a single exception. Again and again it was mainly the servants, representatives, and powerful people, as well as the fanatical believers of the religious and sectarian cults who were downright opponents, schemers and slanderers with regard to the teaching of the truth and the associated teaching of the creational natural laws and recommendations. As believers in cults, it was also often the rulers and other state powers who appeared as open enemies against the wise and prophets and against the teaching of the truth, because they did not want to respect the natural laws and recommendations of creation, because they feared for their power. Consequently, they fought against the teaching of the truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of the life, and opposed it with their own will, which was usually enforced with drastic punishments of torture and death. When later the realization came that the teaching was correct, it was usually much too late, because many human beings had already been murdered who could not be brought back to life. And the guilty parties in this way of persecution and assassination in relation to the wise and prophets and those who were devoted to them were first and foremost the religious and sectarian cult leaders and their servants and representatives, who were never able to recognize the actual reality and its truth. In truth, the recognition was always with only a few human beings from the people, but not with the cult leaders, their servants and representatives, not with their assistants and priests and other cult powers, and also not with their faithful followers up to the rulers and other state leaders. The few among the people, however, never had a chance to assert themselves with their acquired knowledge, for the believers in the cults of God have always been outnumbered and oppressed, persecuted and murdered those who openly stood up against the cults and the delusional belief in a God and taught the truth. Contrary to the few who inclined to the teaching of the truth of the wise men and prophets, the medicine men, simple priests, high priests, and the Sadducees, Pharisees, as well as the scribes of the laws of God, and the scientists and rulers, etc., in bondage to these, held on to their religious sectarian heresies. Consequently, their followers and those who believed in them found it wise to go along with them according to their way, in order not to be punished by them and their proclaimed God when they opposed the heresies and the belief in them. The religious sectarian cult leaders and their servants, representatives, and believers in relation to a God have never voluntarily and joyfully received a true prophet. And strangely enough, since time immemorial, no human being has thought of the fact that nature and reality itself has always shown that it is he alone, but not God, who determines his fate. But this is not surprising, for many thousands of years of experience confirm that medicine men, Pharisees, simple priests, high priests, Sadducees, God-knowing scribes, rulers addicted to God's faith, and the people who believe in God have never been able to recognize the true reality and its truth. They were all fundamentally closed to the truth in their conceit, not infrequently also out of lazy comfort or cowardly fear or fear of divine punishment, and this is how it has remained to this day. Since time immemorial, they have proved this time and again, and they are proving it today, for even today they fight against the effective truth with the meanest and most impure means that a human being is capable of using. It is not possible to argue about this in any way, because both the past and the present also prove this fact drastically and incontrovertibly in every way. And it is also true today, as it has been since ancient times, that those who fall within the scope of medicine men, simple priests, high priests and Pharisees, religious sect commissioners and Sadducees, and scribes with regard to the laws of God, did not and do not act out of real human love, but out of professional envy, lust for power, and for other base reasons. Already at all times they were disturbed by the real truth. Consequently, they never taught the truth faithfully, because they did not know it themselves and still do not know it today. If it was and is foreign to them, that no God is enthroned above man, and does not guide or command him, but that he, man, is the only Lord and master of himself, and determines every smallest iota of his existence. From time immemorial, it has always been the case that they were not aware of many things, so they simply assumed that they had imagined things and made them into factors of faith. So it came about that in some things false beliefs were spread, and these became faith. In order to recognize and understand reality in its truth, they were as weak and incapable since ancient times as they are also today. They could not stand for this in earlier times, and they are also not able to do so today, because they know that their reputation will be shaken. And every human being who knows or seriously researches the history of mankind and the world knows or becomes aware that it has never been otherwise. But as always, the great mass of Earth humans do not want to learn a lesson from this. Only a few isolated individuals turn to the truth, while the great masses are trapped in religiously ancient beliefs in God, and the whole of historical facts cannot be used for truth. This is also because the cause of religious sectarian belief in God, which is always the same, appears again and again in a new form which is even more enslaving. And the new forms, in turn, lead to comfort and delusion in human beings. This deludes him into believing that everything is different in his time than before. Basically, however, everything has remained the same, despite the new forms, because the way it was in the past is also the way it is today. In fact, the present is not different from the past. Nothing has changed in terms of the delusions of God and the fanaticism associated with them, if we disregard the fact that everything has become even worse. May the human being of the earth who is reasonable go to serious people who have turned away from the belief in God and turned to reality and its truth, who openly summon up the courage to confess it and to follow the natural laws and recommendations of creation. For it is the human beings who are not afraid to be honest with themselves and to stand by the fact that they alone, but not a God, determine and lead their lives. They are the ones who know and admit that the religions and sects also still today enslave in the consciousness of every godly believer, and they rummage against anyone who puts in danger the religious sectarian dogmas on which the religious and sectarian cults are built. However, if the human being who knows the truth admits that he does not recognize the religious and sectarian beliefs of the cults, he will not hesitate to be treated as an evil enemy by those who believe in the cults, respectively by those who believe in God, and will not hesitate to accuse him of blasphemy. They are also not afraid to throw dirt on the person who knows the truth, to slander him ugly by every trick in the book, and even to seek to kill him. This is the way it is, and not otherwise. In principle, however, this wrongdoing is often cultivated by the religious sectarian cult leaders, their servants and representatives only for the sake of influence and power, and for the sake of money and wealth, but not truly to follow an urge which is aimed at honoring an almighty God. The human being who does not recognize and does not understand the truth is not able to recognize from these facts, which are so easily recognizable that everything religious and sectarian is nothing but a well-thought-out pack of lies. And that this is so is shown by the fact that the main sects which call themselves religions and the sects which have split off from them, all of which are hostile to each other. Not to mention the fact that the main sects, respectively the main religions, are also not exactly friendly towards each other, although in recent times there have been fake efforts to fraternize between different religions, which however only serve to carry one's own delusions into another religion. In this respect, the Christian churches in particular are doing their best to make friends with Islam, Buddhism, and Judaism. Of course, all this does not lead to any useful conclusions for the human beings, especially not for those who are looking for the effective truth of the natural laws of the creation and their recommendations. Therefore, the human being cannot think that the whole of the religious sectarian faith and the machinations of the cult leaders, their servants and representatives in the search for the truth, can help him, because through them the venerable creational natural laws and recommendations cannot be found and cannot be recognized. But if the human being really seeks the effective truth, then he must recognize reality and make it understandable. And if he really does so, then he is abruptly and harshly awakened from his irresponsible faith and from his roaring inertia of truth. But the cult leaders and their servants and representatives, who came out of medicine men, simple priests, high priests, Sadducees, God law representing scribes and Pharisees, etc., and the cult powers that have come out of them today, and their servants and representatives are only a part of those who mislead the human beings of earth. In fact, there are other enemies of truth, such as the conscious-hearted, the chronic slanderers and liars, and the know-it-alls, all of whom are not among the cult leaders and cult powers mentioned, and not among their servants and representatives. They are all smug, megalomaniacs, self-important, egotistical, envious, and hateful for some reason or other that cannot be explained, and it remains indefinable whether they give them reason to do what they do. It does not always have to be pain and suffering or fear, but it can also be pure joy, a celebration, a photograph, or anything else that gives the impetus for it. The human being clings to something like this and cannot let go, not realizing that all of his experience and sensations came from himself alone and that no God had a hand in it. So he also does not realize that the whole thing was not a correct experience and not a true experience. But this then leads him to rise above his fellow human beings and to calm down with the delusion that he had. His experience, and therefore knows that he stands above the other human being in knowledge and understanding. But how pathetic is such a human being who rises above another and believes that he is more, better, more important, and more valuable. Truly, the experience of human consciousness must be 1,000 and a million-fold if human beings really want to know and understand and gain higher knowledge. And if this is really the case with him, that in his consciousness the experiencing arises in 1,000 and million ways, then he becomes calm and modest and moves in a simple way through the world and cultivates true love, peace, freedom, and harmony in himself and all around. And such a carrier of truth, who carries these high values within himself and also gives them outwards, is a human being who holds on to his high values and protects them like a precious shrine. But if he is a carrier of consciousness, who considers himself a highly esteemed human being and, like in a prison, holds within himself a single experience with a single experience and tries not to get away from it, he's a fool because he thinks that everything imaginable has already happened and that he has enough for his life. But every fool who acts in this way will sooner or later find the truth, and through his understanding will come to awakening, whereby everyone will then realize that he has slept in relation to reality and its truth. Of course, it is correct for a human being to have an experience and to experience it, but nothing of value is done with it by far, if nothing more progressive is done with it. In principle, after an experience, and after experiencing it, one must not stand still, but move on. This must be constant, because only in this way can human beings remain active in their consciousness and cultivate valuable thoughts and feelings. Only then does he realize on his path that his experiences and their experiences are always only a transition, in order to become awake and more awake, and in order to arrive at true recognition. But if a human being does not follow this direction, then the arrogance of consciousness will blossom in him, in which he thinks he is many times more than he really is, and thus he sets himself haughtily, selfishly, high-handedly, egotistically, and megalomaniacally, etc., above his fellow men, who do not follow the same path as he does, and who have different views and opinions than he does. The human being must go further and further along his path through life, just as he must also go further and further in all his recognition of what is going on around him in the things of creation and what he finds in them. He may feel comfortable in the life on earth in which he stands, but he must not want to rise megalomaniacally above this feeling of well-being and to place himself on an equal footing with creation itself. Even if human beings feel well in their life on earth, they must also go further and further with all their strength, because they must not stand still and not be left behind. Otherwise, they are immediately in danger of no longer being able to make progress. But dangers also arise when moving on and ascending, and these must be met with all awareness, courage, and energy in order to be able to overcome them. But if there are human beings who are addicted to the faith in God, then they may, if they wish, be enlightened and instructed about reality and its truth, but under no circumstances may they be missionized. If they are reluctant to accept reality in its truth because of their religious sectarian beliefs, then they may be left alone. And if their nature, speech, and actions are looked at, then it is quickly recognized what is wrong with them. There are many, very many of them, even the majority of humanity, who belong to this circle, in which there is nothing but dead fruit, which rots and does not take in anything more in order to recover, because they think in their conceit that they already have everything. Another circle that is hostile to reality and truth are the phantoms, the dreamers, the frivolous, and the gushers. who are easily inflamed by all that is new, without considering the old and weighing it up against the new, and, if necessary, combining it, thus really harming all that is good. Instead, however, they only hunt for the new and want to conquer the world or a new doctrine. But they do not understand the new, so they quickly sink back into themselves when it comes to putting the new, a doctrine, etc., into practice. They do not have the strength to persevere, to work on themselves, and to learn. They are only suitable as strikers who run towards a goal when there is not much resistance. And they only rush forward when it is necessary to attack their fellow men or to teach them, but without having the solid foundation of the necessary knowledge. They are not more than a quickly ignitable and loose firework, which quickly glows, throws its sparks, and very quickly goes out again. They hang on to thoughts, feelings, and all sorts of fantasies and desires, which are not of much value. But there are also human beings who cannot refrain from taking up all that they are given. So when they are given the opportunity to find and absorb a drop of effective truth, they take it and spread it, but only in the sense that they can appear in any kind of glow and shine with it. They cannot refrain from making themselves great with the drop of truth they have obtained, and from weaving their own views and opinions into what they have been told, heard, or read, and in this way spinning the whole thing away and distorting it profoundly, just as it arises in their fantasy of self-interpretation. These kinds of human beings are not predominantly numerous, but they are all the more dangerous because they are capable of creating a senseless and crazy heresy from a grain of truth, and also of spreading it. And not infrequently, they unfortunately succeed in rising up to become false prophets and false sages as well as cult leaders. In doing so, they harm themselves in that they can no longer learn from reality and its truth, nor can they understand it. But the really bad thing about it all is that they also harm a great many fellow human beings, especially in their search for the effective creational natural truth, and in their world of thoughts and feelings, and in their work, whereby the damage is almost irreparable. Truly there is nothing else for human beings on earth when it comes to living life correctly, and according to the creational natural laws and recommendations, but to cultivate thoughts and feelings within the framework of reality and its truth, and to act accordingly. Fantasy, wishful dreams, and lies do not fit into this, because they are much more distant from reality and its truth, and from the reality of creation than anything else. Creation is created out of reality-given uniform laws, and it is through these laws that it is also kept uniform in its development. With regard to its creation and existence, and with regard to its natural laws and recommendations, it is wrong to give free rein to pathological fantasies, desires, thoughts, and feelings, and to move in religious sectarian forms of belief, which place a God as ruler over human beings, thereby denying them their own dominion over themselves. Billy Simya, say, Silver Star Center, Friday, 10th December 2010, 20:58 hours.
I was aware that you would write a good article from my keywords, but you have exceeded my expectations.
Thanks. I will publish the article in Special Bulletin number 59 in March 2011. Unfortunately, it will not be possible earlier than that, because it will soon be mid-December. A small A6 booklet will probably also come out of it.
Of course, if you want to make a note, next Saturday I want to come back for the correction work.
Fine, I will tell Bernadette she will prepare the interview transcripts.
It is now time for me to go too, because my duties also call me. Goodbye, Edward.
Actually, I wanted to ask you something about Pope Joan, but that can wait until your next visit. So there is not a hurry, and so it is perhaps useful if I copy from the spiritual teaching what I have written about the Pope. I can then copy it into the report of the conversation, so that the readers of the same can also orient themselves to what the conversation will be about. There was a telephone inquiry about the Pope Joan story, which I think we should talk about. The matter is already explained in my presentation, but I would like to have an open conversation with you about it.
We can do that then, but today it is too late for that.
That is why I said that we would want to talk about it on your next visit. Goodbye, dear friend.